Well, good morning, everybody, or it's good afternoon, actually, and welcome to the fourth webinar this morning in our Strategic Cereals Programme. My name is Philip Dolbear, Knowledge Exchange Manager with AHDB on the Cereals and Oilseeds team. I'm obviously joined by David Miller this morning, our new strategic farmer, and I'll introduce the other folks you can see in a minute. But first of all, we've got some housekeeping issues to work through. Hopefully you've been able to see my screen move forward. Just to reiterate that you're all on mute, but that's not to say we don't want you to interact with us. So we wish, obviously, we're all standing in a yard together, but we're not. But there's a questions bar, which you'll see, and most of you will be used to now. So please drop down the questions tab there and ping away questions as we go through the next hour, and we'll be pleased to answer those as we go along. The game plan is to be about an hour, and we will be recording the sessions, so you'll get an email afterwards with a link to the recording if you don't manage to catch all the bits you wanted to. And last but not least, obviously, in our social media world, I think most of us are Twitter friendly, and there are Twitter handles, so please use those to pass on the word. Next, just to say that we are obtaining Basis and Aroso points for this webinar, and if you're not already accustomed to it, there's slightly different requirements for each, but you can put the details as necessary into the chat line, and we'll pick them up and send the details off for registration. The rough outline for this morning. We're starting off now with the introductions, and then we'll pass on to my colleague Emily, who will just talk us through the Strategic Farm Programme and how it all sort of knits together with our rest of our HDB work. We've then put together a video introducing David and the farm, which we'll play, and then I'll come back to introducing all the other faces on the screen you can see to tell you how we will fit into the Strategic Farm. We then move on to a discussion between us all, and then towards the end, Emily will come back again and talk about some of the baselining and trial planning work we've got in motion. And as I say, we'll aim to finish up about 1 o'clock. So without further ado, I'm going to move over to Emily, who hopefully is still there. And she'll just talk us through what exactly is a strategic farm and perhaps how it differs to monitor farms, which many will be accustomed to. Emily, thanks.
Brilliant, thank you, Philip. If I can have my first slide, please. So the Cereals and Oilseeds Farm Excellence Programme is what we talk about, and that's made up of 25 host farms distributed across the country. So these host farms host a range of research and knowledge exchange activities. So we have a range of on-farm trials activities, and then on-farm events and online events such as this one. Whilst the monitor farms focus on a whole farm business improvement during a 3-year programme, the Strategic Cereal Farm Programme is really focused on putting technical trials into place on farm that address specific technical challenges and opportunities at that farm site. And we do that across a 6-year programme. So if I can have the next slide, please. We currently have 4 strategic cereal farms, and these are located in the East, West, Scotland, and then our latest addition to the programme with David in the South. So after harvest this year, the farm in the West, which has been hosted by Rob Fox for the past 3 years, is actually coming to an end because Rob is moving on to a new job position. We've got David Blacker, who's up in Yorkshire in the north, and he'll be starting next year with his programme. So each of the farms are supported by a knowledge exchange manager and somebody working in knowledge transfer, so providing that link back into HDB and research projects that we fund. They're also a really important part of the strategic farms is the steering group. I'm really pleased the steering group for David's farm is here today, and we'll introduce you to each of them next. So if we have a look at the types of activity that we're going to be doing at David's and across the rest of the Strategic Farm Programme, if I can have the next slide, please. We use a range of on-farm trials, so it really depends what the question is that we're trying to answer, and then we design the trial to provide David, the steering group and the wider industry with the most robust data and information from that trial. So that dictates the level of replication that we need, the layout of the trial and the assessments that we'll make on that trial. So you can see on your screen here, these are just 4 example trials. These are actually trials that we've got on our current strategic farms. So we have replicated tramline trials, such as this cultivation trial in the top left-hand corner. This is taking place at the West Farm, looking at the impact of different cultivation depth on soil health, crop rooting and yield. We then have a slightly different version of a replicated tramline trial. So that's the top right-hand corner. This is looking at 2 different varieties split across a field and then looking at different input programs. So again, range of measurements that we're doing on that with research contractors, looking at disease assessments throughout the season and then always taking it through to yield as well. We also have split field trials. So the bottom left-hand corner, this is an example of the cover crop trial at Brian Barker's farm in the east. And we designed this trial in this way because it's looking at different cultivation systems and with and without a cover crop. But the drainage system within each of those fields allowed us to sample the drainage water independently between the 2 treatments. So that's why we designed this, this trial in that way. Then the final type of trial that we look at is a field scale trial. So the bottom right hand corner there, this is again a layout from Rob's farm in the west, but this field trial is taking place at multiple sites. So the benefit of the network and working across not only the strategic farms but also the monitor farms is that we can have multi-site and multi-year data sets from these trials. So we can see how the different treatments perform in different geographical and climate conditions around the country. Next slide, please. And then another way that we work with the strategic farms is it's really important, obviously, as you're aware, there's lots of research that AHDB funds using your levy, and it's really important that that research is directly relevant to you, and we've got that feedback between the end users, making sure that research can be picked up and implemented on farm. So this is an example of a trial that we've been doing at Rob's farm in the west, and this is where we had a new research project that we were commissioning looking at cabbage stem flea beetle in oilseed rape, and we actually ring-fenced some of that funding for the research project to ensure that a number of on-farm trials were conducted within that research project. So it's a really nice link directly back to the people that are doing the research. So if there's things that we're finding on farm that need to be fed back in to improve how we do that research, we've got that direct feedback mechanism by hosting these trials on our strategic farms. And I can't remember, Philip, sorry, is that my last slide?
Yes, it was your last slide, Emily. Thank you very much. Hopefully that gives everybody an idea of what's coming down the tubes. Hopefully we haven't frightened David off and he's still there. But to the man of the moment now, we've made a video introducing David and a few shots of the farm, which I'm going to play now, and then we'll come back to the talking bits. Just I was slightly nervously holding my breath here because they let me loose with the control levers this morning, but hopefully this is going to work and a video will appear very shortly for you guys to look at. Welcome to the AHDB Strategic Farm South, hosted by David Miller. If you're interested in the application of latest research on farm, you're in the right place. Strategic farms put farmers at the forefront of on-farm research. You get to see the latest research projects on farm on a field and farm scale, and the outcomes of those projects over a 6-year period.
My name is David Miller. We're here at Folley Farm, and I'm going to tell you about my vision for the strategic farm. Wheat Sheaf Farming is a farming company where we farm for 3 different farmers within the area. So they're all owned by the farming company is owned by the farmers. We're farming around about 700 hectares, of which 670 are cropped. We have various other environmental schemes, etc. We farm either side of the M3, just south of Basingstoke. The soil type is fairly easy work and loam over chalk. But we have clay cap and a lot of flints on the farm as well. It's all grade 3 land. We have we're about between 500 and 600 feet above sea level, which makes it quite a late farm. And the rainfall here is an average, long-term average is about 34 inches. 10-year average for the last 10 years has crept up to 45 inches, and last year we had somewhere near 48 inches of rain. We're very interested in being able to have or produce more nutritious food, and we'd like to do that where we can actually help to enhance the environment as well. We want to be a profitable farm, but we also want to be farming in a much more environmentally friendly way. Over the last 10 years we've been looking at how we can change our system into what's now become known as regenerative farming. So we're looking at cover crops, what we first started looking at 10 years ago, and then we moved into no-till 6 years ago. So I think what the strategic farm is hopefully going to do for us is to take us beyond those with a bit of a roadmap as to what should be possible, and that's going to be hopefully a roadmap that other farmers can follow, so a set of principles rather than specific things. One of the other benefits that we hear a lot about is the nutritional density of the crops that are produced in a regenerative systems. We're seeing work in other countries that are showing that food produced in a regenerative system has actually got more nutrients in it. So we're keen to prove that that's the same on this farm as well. A lot of farmers are very comfortable with what they're doing, so they don't see a necessity to change. They're still profitable, so I think that's one barrier. So changing to something that they don't know and possibly have less understanding of is a real problem.
My name's Jake Freestone. I'm the farm manager at Overbury Enterprises, and I'm also on the steering group for the strategic farm in the south on David Miller's farm. The steering group for the southern strategic farm is there to act as a sounding board for the host farmer to make sure that the trials that are being tested on farm are relevant to the wider industry and actually can deliver real benefits. I hope that I'm able to bring significant experience to the steering group in terms of regenerative agriculture, in terms of how we manage our soils, our rotation and our cover crops. I'm hoping to see at the new strategic farm a real insight into how we can improve our soil management and our soil health to reduce costs and inputs that can be reflected into the wider industry. I'm hoping to see new innovations, new ideas about how we can improve crop performance whilst reducing growing crop costs and improving financial profitability. I'm sure that we can make a difference with the tests and trials that we're planning to undertake at the farm here to show people that there is an alternative way of growing effective crops with reduced environmental impact and also higher margin at the end of the day for the farmer. I think this is going to be really important going forward as we face the challenges over the next 5 to 10 years.
I think our goal really is over the next 6 years as a strategic farmer is that we would like to come up with a set of guidelines, principles that other farmers could follow, which will be a roadmap through regenerative agriculture. We've come as far as cover crops and no-till, and it's really the next steps that we're trying to quantify.
Great. I hope that's given everybody a taster. We had a lot of fun putting it together, a few mistakes. One or two are reporting that they couldn't hear the volume on the video, so apologies for that. Others have said it was fine. When you get the recording after this webinar is finished, hopefully it will record and hear properly in that. But if you can't, just get in contact with me and we'll try and sort it out. Okay, so as sort of highlighted in the video there, a key part of the process is the steering group with David. So we'll just sort of quickly go around the screens, just getting everybody to say hello. But David, we've sort of kept you quiet for long enough as the strategic farmer. Do you just want to join in and say good morning, as it were?
Yeah, good morning.
Good. The volume's working, so that's the main thing.
That's good.
And Jake, if you're not offended, you've sort of introduced yourself on film, so we'll pass you by, but just ask Craig to join in and say who you are, Craig.
Morning, Craig Livingstone, farm manager at Lockley Estate, so 30 miles away from David. Not as far on the journey as some guys on this panel, but keen to be involved and learn on the way.
Thanks, Craig. And then just down the road is almost over the hedge, actually, is Andy Basin.
Yeah, morning everyone. Yeah, my name's Andy Basin. I'm the farm manager at Newhouse Farm near Winchester, so not far from David at all. And yeah, really looking forward to getting stuck into this program with the other guys.
Thanks, Andy. And Andy, of course, was an ex-monitor farmer with us, so he's seen part of the process before, and we'll see through this how it develops into the strategic farm. We then, and David was quite keen to do this, but draw in expertise and people from other parts of the country. So working up through, we've got Tim Parton up there in Staffordshire.
Afternoon, everybody. Tim Parton, I'm farm manager at Brood Park Farm here. I try to farm the farm as biologically as possible, so I haven't used insecticides for 6 years now. Trying to get away from fungicides, managed to get through this season so far without using any fungicides, and pretty hopeful I'll get there by using biology and the correct nutrition. And I've gotten along the journey now. I don't do any autumn herbicides, very rarely. So halved herbicide use really, and just moving forward.
Thanks, Tim. And then up in Yorkshire, we've got Angus.
Good afternoon, everybody. Angus Gowthorpe, farming partnership with my mother, just south of York, farming 400 acres. Give or take 100 acres of that is down to grass, so we have a suckler herd on that. Herbal lays and mob grazing on the livestock side of things. Farming very similarly to Tim, as biologically as possible on the arable side. And just this morning, we're currently having to go drilling maize, which is a new venture for us, and that is all being direct drilled. So that's going to be another one to be very interesting to watch going forwards. Always trying something new.
Thank goodness, yes, and that's a sort of fairly topical point actually, because as the steering group there are for David to bounce ideas off, but for the steering group to be representatives for you as wider levy payers to feed in your thoughts, and for them then the steering group to feed into the strategic farm process to try and use the expression steer the work we do on the strategic farm that's applicable to you, the information you want to find out as levy payers, and then our role is to get that information back out onto farm again. So we're now just going to enter sort of 20 minutes or so of a bit of sort of toing and froing conversation between us all. So hopefully all our screens are there, the pictures are there, and we'll try and sort of remember to sort of put mics on and off as we talk around. But David, I'm going to sort of perhaps kick off a question to you. On the video, you described it as a journey you're on in terms of developing the farming system you are. Was that a conscious strategic decision, or one that has just sort of evolved and indeed is still evolving?
It's definitely something that's evolved as time has gone by. You know, I think go back to sort of the mid-1970s when I first started working on farms, when there was no glyphosate and life seemed very easy. We weren't using a lot of fungicides and things like that. So, you know, unfortunately, I'm old enough to sort of have been at the start of what was supposedly the Green Revolution, which has made life very complicated as we got towards the 21st century, and it just becomes something that I've started to challenge. which has meant gradually, as information has come along about what can be possible, as we are evolving our system to sort of cope with those sort of things. So yeah, very much an evolution rather than it's had the odd light bulb moment, but they're small in comparison to the actual evolution.
Yeah, and don't let me hog the mic, folks. So if you want to chip in and challenge David and he says, or challenge each other, now is the time for free for all to a certain extent. Just thinking about a journey, and perhaps Craig, you might be the best place to answer this. What do you think are the sort of key drivers towards changing to this sort of more biological system philosophy of farming? Do you think is it just a belief in yourself that you're doing it for the greater good, or is it policy, or is it margin, or the public, or you've got your toe in the supply chain given where you're managing? But where is the driver coming from to make some of the changes that you all are on, and a bigger part of the industry is starting to pick up with now as well?
Well, all of the above, what you just mentioned, really, Philip. I mean, I think for us, it's certainly not a feel-good factor. I mean, we sort of say you can't do the green in the red. So this is a business and it's got to be profitable. So that underlines a lot of the change in policy for us. And like Tim says, the elimination of a lot of the inputs. You know, I feel surrounded in a position where it's almost dictated what comes into the farm and dictated to what goes off it and where it goes. So it's trying to break and gently disrupt that slightly. So I think the questions asked of us as farmers today are totally different to what was asked, what my granddad did 70 plus years ago. Didn't say he did anything wrong, but we're farming with an element of hindsight. So we're answering probably 10, 11, 12 different questions as growers, and we've got to respond to that because that's what consumers are asking us. So yeah, all of what you said. And actually, it's lit a candle when I read what some of the other people on this panel have done or are doing, listen to all the podcasts and stuff that we all probably listen to. It just, for me, it's a flickering candle of something different and change, and it's all positive. So,
yeah.
Philip, I think you can add to that as well. The list of active ingredients that we're actually able to use on the farm is rapidly shrinking and reducing. So we need to start looking and exploring other ways, if you like, of growing food. And for us, this sort of started, I suppose, revolution to start with, and then evolution from then on is what sort of kicked us off along this journey. It started off being an economic decision: how can we reduce our costs? And actually, then a lot of these other benefits, you know, to the wider environment. I'm thinking about cleaner water, cleaner air, carbon capturing, moving towards net zero, have come along, you know, as passengers on that original journey driven by economics.
Yeah, and I guess it's answering a question that's come in on the chat, and also, Andy, I could ask you as well, but what is it you think that yourself and other farm managers, perhaps starting the journey, are really looking for to get out of, say, the strategic farm work we're going to do over the next 5 or 6 years?
I think, speaking on my behalf, I mean, it's got to be relatable. You know, everything we trial and we work on, you know, it's got to be the metrics have got to be there, you know, in sort of simple farmer terms, because that's kind of what I look for. I'm a simple farmer, so I kind of look for results that I can use and take home. So I think, you know, you've got all your kind of standard topics like your cabbage stem flea beetle mitigation, your carbon capture, cover cropping, all those kind of topics we've talked about a lot. But I think, you know, to get some sort of firm results from those trials is what I'd be looking for, and sort of being able to take them back to my own farm. You know, that's what I need to have.
David, I know you've been quite keen not to, in some sense, not to label your farming system as a regen ag farming system. What's your thoughts behind that?
I think there's been a lot of talk around regenerative agriculture that has been a bit holier than thou, a bit church-like, religious. I think that if you want to use a term regenerative ag, I mean, it can cover a whole range of measures that you can start to do on a farm, you know, whether it's just if you want to start looking at the odd cover crop, if you want to start minimizing your cultivations, you know, you're looking at a couple of the pillars of the regenerative code, as it were. But it's just, you know, you can do as little or as much as you like. There's a real plethora of things that equate to some point of regenerative agriculture, and that's just to have, you know, a background of things in mind that you want to achieve at the end of it. And I think on the farm, a lot of that is, you know, everybody wants to build their organic matter. There's 101 different ways you can go about that. And also you want to build up your diversity, your biodiversity of within crops, within the soil and everything else. There's just lots of different ways of going about it. So it's just trying to pick out the ones that A, suit you, and also B, are the biggest gains.
Yeah. Angus, you're sort of on the journey up there as well. What are your key learnings so far, and how are you looking to develop the process?
Personally, it was very much a decision started with in 2014 by buying a strip till drill, and then continued 2 years later into a disc drill. And it was very much, it was a definite decision. And when the strip till drill came, the plough and the power and the subsoil and everything else went, so that they couldn't be dragged out to the nettles or the back of the shed, so to speak, when it came wet or whatever. Because what I learned from others was that you could soon take your soils backwards just by trying to get a crop in the ground when it was too wet or whatever. So we haven't put a piece of steel in the ground since January 14, and the soils have just improved massively. And those changes are very quick at the start and slow to a certain extent afterwards, but they're just the soil is improving year on year.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about starting with a drill purchase there, Angus, and soils improving, but a question to everybody that was come in from Louise, where is the best starting point in this journey towards this sort of more environmental biological farming, and how do you measure success?
For me, the starting point is between the ears. Until you can get your head around it mentally and make that decision for it that you want it to work and not be half-hearted, then it won't work. You need the right mindset, and you need to gain as much knowledge and experience as you can from others. There's great groups on Twitter, on YouTube. There's lots to learn. There's Base UK, which is the organisation run by farmers for farmers, which is great help for people learning or wishing to learn more about conservation ag or regen ag. And it continues to be a great resource for the likes of Jake, myself, Tim, and many others that have been on the journey for a lot of years already, because there's always something new to learn, to pick up and to improve on things at home. And conversely, whilst we're learning, we're also helping others who are starting along the journey.
Thanks, Angus. Tim, how do you measure progress in your business? You're on mute, Tim.
There's so many angles you can come at that from, Philip. Financially, we're far better off than what we were 10 years ago. The whole ecosystem on the farm is working now, so soils are working. So I don't need to apply the P&K fertilizers because the soils are just making that available, because I've got a biological polyfungal soil now that's just working in a symbiosis form with that plant. So all the nutrition is going into the plant. So it means I don't have to put the inputs in there. So you could regard that as a real progression, because I'm not buying the inputs. The wildlife on the farm has gone through the roof. So we've got kestrels, barn owls nesting. This year we must have had 8 or 10 pairs of lapwings nesting on the farm. So you could measure it from that instance as the fact, you know, the whole ecosystem is working. We've got far more wildlife. I catch moths for Rothamsted on the farm, and a trap locally that stopped trapping last year. I caught more moths in 3 months than they caught in 10 years. So do you measure it from that ecosystem? There's so much that you could measure as a success. My organic matters are rising by about 0.2% a year. So you could measure that as a success. It depends what you really want. For me, to see the whole farm being alive, and I'm not poisoning the farm with all these chemicals. And I think moving forward, our customer base, the general public, will want and demand to know where their food is coming from. And I think we've got to start and supply what they need. And the other beauty, as Jake mentioned earlier, there's so many chemicals that we're losing now. We've got to be ahead of the game and start to look at how we can produce food in a way without using these chemicals, because we can't keep polluting this planet. We can't keep polluting our waterways and turning a blind eye and ending up with all these dead zones around the world when most of our oxygen is coming from the oceans from photosynthesis. We cannot keep polluting that in the name of food production, in my mind, and turning a blind eye. We've got to work to create a sustainable and a regenerative planet moving forward for the benefit of all of us. And I'm drifting there, so I'll stop now.
No, it's good points, Tim. And as Craig said earlier on, I think it's at the end of the day, all that has got to equate to the business being in the green, or in the back rather, to help it sort of be sustainable and move forward. And we'll come back to perhaps some of the measuring towards the end with Emily when we talk about where we're starting off at the beginning of this year. Just to answer a question from Adrian, the strategic farm will run for 6 years. So the idea is it's much a longer period than the 3-year monitored farms, but we can hopefully look at work over the course of nearly a whole rotation. Talking rotation, David, another question that Adrian's posed is, would root crops be an option in your rotation?
It wouldn't be an option with the soils we've got, with the stone content we've got in the fields. There are people who do grow some potatoes around us, but it's stone and there's a massive operation for them. So I think with the simplicity of the system that we're running now, root crops would add to the would take away from that simplicity and add something that we don't necessarily want to add into it.
Yeah. And another question here, sort of tying into some of the drivers, perhaps, how critical or crucial are the environmental schemes, stewardship schemes, towards the whole process and being integrated in with the farming to make the farming system work? Jake, do you want to? I know you've got various schemes running. Do you want to have a go at that one?
Yes, thanks, Philip. I was just about to comment actually with David, if he wanted some root crops and then some sheep to graze them off over the winter with stubble turnips, that might be an option. But in terms of stewardship, I think it offers some really huge benefits, farming, not just in this way, but maybe more conventional options as well. So we're looking at some grass lays, the GS4, the sort of the herbal rich lays, taking arable fields out for a couple of years, and then being able to utilize that with our livestock, clean up some arable weeds, invest a whole load of carbon captured and locked away in the ground, and you're using peas or beans to come in as a first crop after that into wheat in sort of year 4. So that's a great option. Catch crops, cover crops is something else we're having a look at through our higher tier scheme now as well. We're getting payment for doing something that ultimately we would be doing anyway, so that's got to be good. There are some tweaks to the management that we'll need to make, but delivering huge environmental benefits. We farm sort of 1,000 feet above sea level, 300 meters, some of it quite steeply sloping, quite light soil. And since we've made a switch into regenerative or conservation agriculture systems, we're having 0 soil erosion running down the hills now. And that's good for the farming business. The family have been farming here for 300 years. You know, the soil, the land is our biggest asset, and that is something that we want to cherish, nurture, and improve. So if there are schemes out there, and whether that's DEFRA schemes, Natural England, or water company schemes, things like that, farmers have an opportunity to really take advantage of those for environmental wins and also for business wins as well.
Thanks, Jake. David, Tim talked about cutting inputs, fungicides and herbicides and so on, but quite dramatically. Where are you in that process of converting the farming system towards being able to reduce inputs?
We're not down the road as far as Tim is. We're not using any base fertilizers anymore, no phosphates and potash. We're finding we can, as Tim said, access unavailable P's and K's, which are helping a lot. But I think that the continued reduction in inputs is really where the strategic farmer is going to really help, because we need to have sort of key trigger points as to when we can start to reduce these inputs. You know, we try not to use too many insecticides, but you know, are we at that point where we won't have any issue with aphids in the autumn? I don't think we are yet. We've still got to get the health of the plant in the autumn to be much better before we can take them away completely. You know, we're trying not to use them, but in the end, there's a few fields where we should have possibly used them. So, yeah, it's understanding where these measurements are that can trigger these decisions reliably and economically correctly.
Yeah, Andy, you as a steering group member, you're there to sort of be a sounding board for David, to sort of collate ideas from the farming industry inwards to work on at the strategic farm. But going in the other direction, what is it coming out of a strategic farm that's going to sort of float the boat of the wider farm manager farming population?
I think it's as I said earlier, just, you know, all the kind of hot topics that are being talked about, and it's just having you know, whenever I go to a meeting, I take my notepad and I always jot down a couple of things. It's those couple of things that kind of sows the seed in your mind, and you go away and just think, well, actually, yeah, that might work for us, and it's got to be workable for your sort of for farmers, you know, across a broader scale. It's all very well having these kind of sort of ideas, so within a meeting, but it's got to be able to be spread out to the wider farming group. And I think for me that's really important, to make it accessible.
Yeah, Angus, you talked about buying the drill, but in hindsight's the perfect art, obviously. But if you had your time again, would you do anything differently to where you've come so far?
No, other than starting 20 years ago.
Yes, it's interesting, isn't it? I suspect many of us would give that answer to a lot of things, not just farming as well. Nice to wind the clock back. Nice to wind the clock back 20 years.
The other thing, really, what I didn't do, and I know it's a regret of many others as well, I wish I'd taken baseline organic matters and various other measures across the whole farm when I started, and I didn't do that. We periodically do them going forwards, or have been doing for several years, but it would have been really nice to have taken that baseline organic matter across the farm with some photographs and digs and some penetrometer readings and things when we first started, and then we could compare back over as we progress.
Yeah.
I would totally agree, Angus, with that. That's a really key point if you're just about to set off, and I think that's one of the advantages that this strategic farm may well have, is that there's some land that's potentially coming back into this system, that will be a nice benchmarking field or two to have a look at.
So yeah, for anybody that's setting off into this journey, do as much sampling as you possibly can now. It's surprising how quickly things change, and you soon forget what it was like before you actually got there.
I know if John Pawsey was on this call, he'd be encouraging us all, you all, to invite all the local flower, birds and bees groups to come onto your farms to record whatever they can, wherever they can, not just to have the measurement, but also to engage that population with our farming practices. We keep talking about this journey. A question specifically for Tim here. How did you begin your journey towards no fungicide usage and reduced herbicides?
It's a combination of things, really. I just became very aware that if you get a healthy plant, if a plant's healthy, well, you won't get disease coming in. So I do an awful lot of sap and tissue testing to make sure that plant is healthy. And by understanding that physiologically of the plant, of what it needs are and where it's going from, it gave me more confidence to move away from using fungicides. And I wouldn't advise anybody to go cold turkey. It's got to be a gradual thing. Lots of people come here and they want to go from A to Z and get to where I am. And you have to earn the right not to use fungicides. It all starts with a healthy soil. You can't just go out there and go cold turkey, because you'll just fall flat on your face, in my mind. You've got to earn the right to get there. And once you get there, obviously the benefits are far outstanding. But it's just a gradual process, and it's all down to crop nutrition and a healthy soil, and just going at a slow pace to get to where you want to go to, and not forgetting where you're aiming for. But you do have to have nerves of steel at times when you need to stop reading some of the magazines that will always tell you that it's the worst year out there for every type of disease going, and just learn to be a farmer again and make your own decisions.
Yeah, thanks, Tim. David, come back to you. Just sort of slightly shifting the emphasis a little bit. I know one area you're interested in is food nutrition, and perhaps that's something we're going to pick up on over the next 6 years. And this might be an area which might capture the interest of the public as much as the farming press. Can you just share your thoughts on that, please?
Yeah, we've sort of been hearing whispers for some time that different farming systems produce different quality of food, and it was really fueled by one of the Oxford Real Farming Conference talks this year from Dan Kettridge in America, where some of the stuff he was finding with the different systems for producing vegetables was just mind-blowing. 15 times as much nutrition in one compared to another, and it just really sparked imagination. And if we're talking about systems that are going to enhance soil health, which is then going to help with plant health, the natural progression is that the healthy plant will then go on to produce healthier food and healthier people. So and that phrase has been stolen from Edward Faulkner when he wrote a book in 1945. This is not new stuff we're looking at, but it's just stuff that's making us look maybe in a different light at what we should be able to achieve. So if we can prove this, then yeah, I think this style of farming would have definite advantages over many other types of farming as well.
I think you've probably all been involved in Open Farm Sundays in one way or another, but come to you perhaps, Craig. Is this an area you think where we can re-engage with the general public?
Definitely. It's just answering another question that we're being asked to answer. So we've got a new veg enterprise on the farm, polytunnel, and like David, clay cap, heavy flints and whatnot. So yeah, it's not traditionally the place you start growing veg, but people want it, and we want to supply it. And what better way to integrate and things is have a product to sell. So if you can do that in an ecological way, we're not organic, but it's grown basically to organic standards. So yeah, it's Open Farm Sunday, and I know Jake does it as well. It's a great way to get people onto the farm and talk about whatever terminology we want to use, whatever word, we're all in the same. We're going in the right direction, so it's a good place to start.
Cool. Just following up on your comments about countryside stewardship, Jake, as a follow-up question here is from Robin Gibbons about, do you think you could afford to do the regen, conservation ag, call it what you like, farming system without the stewardship payments?
Most definitely. Yeah, I mean, we have done for the last 5 or 6 years in terms of cover cropping. We have put grass lays in again for the last 3 years. The first lot are just coming out now, where we've got a lot of wood.
I think the point is, financially, could you do it all you're doing without the payments that are coming in, or the levels of payments that are coming in to help fund it?
Yeah. Well, I don't know that they help funding it. The point I was making was that we were actually doing, cover cropping and grass rotations before we put those options into the stewardship schemes.
Okay.
So our high scheme is starting January the 1st, 2021. We've been doing both of those options out of our own pocket, if you like, for the last sort of 5 or 6 years. So yes is the answer. In terms of reduced cost, reduced carbon footprint. We've taken on contract farming areas with our existing equipment. So it most definitely is a more profitable way to farm. Absolutely.
And just sort of threading together words here, you mentioned carbon, and there's a question here about whether you guys think being paid for, having additional income from carbon sequestration be part of your business mix going forward. I don't propose to go around everybody, but perhaps Angus, Andy, would you have any thoughts on that?
For myself, definitely. Provided that we only sell any carbon sequestered after we've reached carbon neutrality. So we need to be carbon net zero first, and then any surplus carbon that we're sequestering, as it were, after that, then definitely there's a demand there, there's a market there. We're providing a service through doing so, which regenerative agriculture certainly aids through reduced nitrogen usage and reduced cultivations, reduced carbon emissions, along with all the other benefits. And I think as well there's a great potential for selling biodiversity to the general public as well as business.
Andy, similar thoughts or different thoughts? Or?
Yeah, similar thoughts to that. I mean, I'm slightly concerned about the policing of the whole thing. How it's managed. But yeah, no, I think if there's money there and you're doing the right thing, I think that's great. But yeah, just like to see some just see how that's being policed, managed.
So, again, it's a question that applies to everybody really, but I'll pick on you, Tim. What do you see your business looking like in 6 years' time when BPS has gone? You're on mute again, Tim. You've been very well behaved switching it off. You've got to remember to switch it on.
We could farm without subsidies now. I sort of had this vision 10 years ago that we needed to be able to farm without subsidies. It was always, to me, the writing was always on the wall that they were going to go whether we were in Europe or not. So I've always had that vision in mind that we would farm sustainably and stand on our own 2 feet without subsidies. So I see carbon being part of our income going forward, definitely. But again, I could farm without it if need be.
I'm just conscious of time ticking away here, and I think I'll work through most of the questions. We could have another hour discussing some of these issues in greater depth, I'm sure, but that's for another day. One of the things we touched on was sort of measuring where we are at the start, and if I can bring you back in, Emily, just to talk a little bit about the initial work we're doing in year 1. Setting our stall out, so to speak, and starting to plan the trials going forward. So, Christian, if we can move the slides forward 1 and back to you, Emily.
Brilliant, thank you, Philip. If I can have the next slide, please. So I think it was Angus that mentioned if there was something that he could go back and do, it would be to have that baseline, that benchmark at the start of his journey against which you can measure the success and the change that you're implementing. And as Philip has said, baselining is a really important part of the strategic farm programme. So all of our farms in the first year, we undertake this process of baselining. Some of the farms do have trials alongside that, but that baselining really is the focus of that first year. So what you can see on the screen at the moment is the development of the programme at the Strategic Farm East with Brian Barker. So you can see that back in 2018, so that was harvest 2018, we did that first year baselining, and we did have one trial in the ground that year. But what you can see is we repeat that baselining. So we repeated it in 2020, we'll repeat it next year, and then obviously at the end of the programme as well, so we can monitor those changes over time. If there are certain metrics that we're interested in looking at, we can do that every year. So it's really up to the group to decide what it is that they want to look at, and therefore how frequently we should be looking at it. And we do that in collaboration with the researchers as well, so being supported by them. I think this slide shows quite nicely as well, not only that repeat baselining, but how the programme builds during the 6 years as well. So what we found at Brian's was that there were certain things at the start of the programme that were kind of hot topic in the industry that people were really interested in. So we looked at those in the first few years, but then over the years, other topics have come up, and other conversations have started around things such as carbon audits, and we've already been talking about it today. So it wasn't really something that was on the radar, back in 2017-18 when we started this, but it is something that's really important now. So some of the trials will go through the full 6 years, some of them will just be for a few years, we'll dip in and out of some of them. So you can see how the programme evolves. So if I can have the next slide, please. This just gives you an overview of some of the baselining assessments that we've done at the other 3 farms. So our farms will have a weather station on site, and then we'll do a variety of assessments, especially in that first year. So each of the farms, as they can decide specifically what it is that they want to look at, but there is some commonality between the different sites. So you can see here on the slide an example of the soil health scorecard. This is taken from our Strategic Farm West. This scorecard has actually been developed as part of a joint research project with BBRO and AHDB, looking at different metrics when we're measuring soil health, and looking at putting thresholds on those metrics. So they've developed this traffic light system to indicate where you might need to pay particular attention to certain aspects of your soil. And these thresholds are tailored to different soil types. So it's quite a nice way for us to compare not only on one farm between different fields, but between all of the different farms in our programme. We now, I've mentioned carbon already, but we now offer all of the strategic farms a carbon audit, and then that can help us look at interventions and trials that we might want to take forward during the 6 years. All of the farms currently are doing lots of assessments around the diversity and abundance of pests, pollinators and beneficials. So we've got these solitary bee nests, we've got aphid bait cards, yellow sticky traps, pitfall traps, all set out across all of the farms. And then another aspect that we've already spoken about today is plant health. So there's lots of different assessments that we can do looking at plant health, both within the field and then sending samples off for analysis. So if I can have the next slide, please. This is just a bit of a summary. Apologies for all the words on this slide, but we had a really good steering group meeting at David's, I can't remember if it was last week or the week before, a few weeks ago, where we managed to get out to the farm and all catch up. And we talked about a lot of the topics that have come up today and where our priorities are for the programme. And we've identified kind of 4 topic areas that we want to look at during the programme. Obviously that might change as the topics develop, But those 4 areas that we'll be baselining this year and then looking at developing trials for are around the rotation, soil health, plant pest interactions that we've already spoken about, and then this idea of the start and end grain. So not only looking at the health of the seed, but also the nutrition in the end product that we produce that we've mentioned. So we're busy working behind the scenes over the next couple of months, getting the research contractors appointed to not only look at the baselining assessments and develop those with us, but also looking at the trials that we want to put in the ground in this first year. So that's a very quick summary of where we're at the moment with the Strategic Farm South, but it'll be really great to have everyone follow us along on the journey. Thank you, Philip.
Thanks, Emily. I'll give David warning. I'll come back to him in a minute just for a final word. But if I could just move through the last few slides now, just to highlight that this today is the first of a series of strategic farm events, effectively through June. Each strategic farm has its own website, and here's David's link there. But going on to the next slide, as I say, all of the strategic farms are appearing through June on Fridays, looking at different issues on each of their strategic farms. And there are workshops as well, more interactive workshops on those topics through the course of each day. And as usual, you can tap into those through our website. I'll just linger on that a few seconds in case anybody's quickly getting their phone out and trying to grab a screenshot. As ever, it would be wrong of me not just to remind you all of the much bigger AHDB machine behind strategic farms. There are numerous tools and harvest toolkits and calculators and recommended list apps and sites and so on, all there for you to help you to run your businesses more profitably, more sustainably, more quickly, more easily. We keep on developing them, but as ever, development requires feedback from you folks to find areas which we can make better. Also this summer, we got our Arable Connections events, which are really sort of based around the recommended lists, trials around the country, and developing discussions on varieties to agronomy issues around the country. We're doing it online this year. Normally we would have had meetings at the recommended list sites, but alas not this year. But again, there's the link, and you can see which events are on in your area to tap into. And that just leads me to the events page, where not only are the webinars, but there are the physical meetings, which are all being well starting again. The Monitor Farm meetings after the 21st of June, where we're all hoping we can get back to some degree of normality. So that just about wraps up what we wanted to cover this morning. Just to remind everybody that you will be receiving a recording of this if you wish. I really appreciate your response of feedback to this webinar of our survey, which you'll get automatically as well. I'm here to contact if you've got any queries, questions or thoughts. Really welcome that. And as I said at the beginning, our Twitter savvy steering group are all there to be conduits of information inwards and outwards from the strategic farm. So David, I'm going to just come back to you for a sort of final rallying cry as the man of the moment, and then we'll close off.
Yeah, I think we're really looking forward to the next 6 years. It's been an incredible journey for us so far with the type of farming that we're doing. I think it's going to be great to have some more scientific evidence behind what we're seeing at the moment as anecdotal evidence on the farm. So no, really looking forward to it, and I want to thank the steering committee for agreeing to join us and help us along this journey.
Thank you, David, and thank you all, yes, steering group and Emily for joining us and contributing this morning, and the wider population out there listening. Thank you for joining us. Thank you for your questions. We very much look forward to this journey ahead. But for now, it's thank you and goodbye, and hope you have a good harvest when it comes, which won't be too far around the corner. Thank you very much.